Greetings, ladies and metal-nerds, and welcome to today's edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Clarity, written by Zephylandantus. The room was mostly empty. That was not how I'd imagined at Santa's hearing, but then again, with Captain Darish as a subject, I guess nothing should be as usual. It was a tribunal set up, with Navy High Command seated at a long table, facing the room, and the Senator seated at a desk on the right side of the room, facing the tribunal. On the left side was Captain's desk, which was currently occupied by First Lieutenant Hansen, the newly appointed XO of the TEV Tricard. The audience seats were mostly empty. The few seats that were occupied were taken by the Senator's entourage and 3 of the Tricard's safety officers. This was not my first tribunal hearing to determine whether a captain was fit to hold his position or not, but it definitely was the most interesting one. "This hearing is now in session," the Fleet Admiral leaned into the microphone as she spoke. "Present Captain Darish." The doors to the far end of the room opened, and Captain Darish rolled into the room on a pushcart walking wagon. Not an adult-sized equivalent, no, an actual toddler's walking wagon, shaped like a small fire truck. He nimbly drove the child-sized vehicle to the table, where Lieutenant Hansen sat and parked it. Then he proceeded to the far end of the table, where he stood behind the chair and finger-gunned the tribunal members. "No weapons in this hearing, Captain," I heard myself say. I was Chief Security Officer and responsible for the safety of everyone present. Captain Darish looked at me, then at his empty hands, still held in the shape of finger guns, and then at the tribunal members. "My apologies," he mumbled as he put his imaginary weapons on the table in front of him. Then he proceeded to draw an invisible pistol from his non-existent hip holster and placed it on the table. The captain successfully mimed extracting and discarding the following: a rifle slung over his shoulder, 2 repeater pistols from his belt, a back-mounted RPG, a rapier, 2 small crossbows, a knife from his boot shaft, 3 hidden blades from his sleeve, 1 small machine gun from his left thigh, and a longbow with arrows, after which he stood straight and looked at the tribunal. Lieutenant Hansen rose from his chair, held up an apologetic finger, and proceeded to grab an imaginary fragmentation grenade from the captain's chest and placed it on the pile. "Right, sorry," Captain Darish muttered, and took a seat on the small carpet that had been laid out next to the table. He then opened the seat compartment of the walker car and took out 2 toy cars and began driving them on the carpet. The Fleet Admiral cleared her throat and proceeded. "Captain Darish is facing charges of being a disgrace to the Terran fleet and a danger to himself and those surrounding him." She looked at the lieutenant. "Has the captain been informed of these charges?" "Yes, Fleet Admiral, he has." "And how does the captain relate to the charges against him?" The lieutenant looked slightly uncomfortable as he paused. "Lieutenant, how does the captain respond to the charges?" Hansen looked at the captain, who was driving 2 small cars in an increasingly smaller spiral pattern on the carpet, accompanied by an excited tire squeals. "Yellow," Hansen said after a short breath.
"This is what I am talking about," the Senator burst out. "A complete and total disregard of proper procedures. This man is clinically deranged and in no way, shape, form fits to command anyone, let alone himself. But somehow the Terran fleet has equipped him with not only a ship, but also a crew of 54 sailors. I demand that this man be stripped of his commission and interned in a facility that can accommodate his needs for medical treatment."
"Senator, this tribunal is here to assess the validity of the charges against him, which are a disgrace to the fleet and a danger to his crew, not his needs for medication. That is a medical issue and will be handled by medical professionals, not elected officials," the Fleet Admiral stated calmly. "Please keep your statements relevant to the case in point." The attention of the room turned to Captain Darish as the 2 cars crashed loudly into each other, and a 2-finger person was introduced into the driver's side of each vehicle. The 2-finger people faced off against each other and engaged in a heated murmur argument. The gestures involved suggested that they were arguing over which one was to blame. The blue car finger person assaulted the red car driver, who ended up on his back before the blue car's engine was turned over and loudly sped off from the scene. The lieutenant mimed picking up a remote and called the captain's attention with a discreet cough. Captain Darish looked at his XO, who pushed the mute button on the imaginary remote, and the captain immediately went silent. As first, an ambulance and then a police car drove into the scene. The Senator struggled to regain his train of thought. "Darish has—" "Captain Darish, Senator," the Fleet Admiral interrupted the flustered man. The senator inhaled a sharp breath and shot an eye at the scene that played out on the carpet, where the red car finger person was being assessed by an ambulance driver and loaded into an ambulance.
Right. Captain Darish has held his rank and commission for 7 years. Having failed to advance in rank in such a time period is a clear indicator that the man is incompetent to perform his duties, and according to fleet regulations, any officer that fails to promote within 5 years of attaining their current rank is to be either demoted, decommissioned, or retired.
A quick shuffle of documents in the senator's hands later, he continued.
Furthermore, it is clearly stated in regulations that any officer who commands responsibilities is expected to condone him or himself with the presence that is befitting a naval commander in the eyes of the public.
The senator leaned back in his seat and let out a smug, superior expression wash over his face as he gestured to the carpet where Captain Darish was orchestrating a surgical intervention on the red car two-finger driver, and the two-finger doctor threw his tools away in defeat before he shook its head, wrist, and made a sad gesture. The fleet admiral sighed. "You're leaning on protocol, Senator. Is that the right way to address this issue?"
It is the only way to address this issue.
The senator's face was contorted into a vicious scowl. "Lieutenant?" Hansen had requested the floor. "Yes, ma'am," he said, as he rose from his chair. Fleet regulations also state that any naval captain can surpass a forced promotion as long as he still has admirable performance and at no active frontline personnel can be subjected to public interaction. He walked around the table and opened the tablet page on the display. The TEV Tricard has been in a total of 25 transfers in the last 6 months. All of these have been due to promotions and reassignments to the flagship and high-profile positions. When inquired as to why Command was hell-bent on sniping the staff from the Tricard, the general answer was due to the excellent performance and surefire initiative the Tricard crew display on a regular basis. He turned the projection off. Captain Darish has turned down any promotion offers given to him in the past 7 years. The lastest, and in the end of our last tour, which concluded 6 days ago, and he cannot be presented to the public, as the Terran exploration vessel 3 cards short of a full deck is, in very nature, an exploration and frontline vessel. The lieutenant shot a quick glance at the Captain Darish, who mimed pressing a mute button on the imaginary remote again. The captain immediately resumed his mumble narration of the ongoing funeral services for the red car driver. It was a solemn service, where the minister spoke hushed words in a fond tone. At the end of the sermon, the folded paper coffin was covered with a Terran Alliance flag, and a single two-fingered trooper bugled taps in a solemn, wailing tribute to the deceased. The lieutenant, the tribunal members, and those of the senator's entourage that had served all stood at attention, removed their headwear, and waited for the last morning note to die out. The room was dead silent as Captain Darish commanded the firing of the 21 volley salute. As the volley was fired, still mouthed by the captain, the servicemen in the room snapped a salute. As the sound of the last volley died out, the senator scoffed.
This is what I'm talking about. This is a publicly available hearing, and the lunatic has just had an entire room stand at attention to bury a hand.
Regulation, Lieutenant Hansen calmly stated, dictates that the captain of a naval vessel can, at his or her own discretion, freely extend the funeral rites of a serviceman to any individual they see fit to receive such a gesture. Furthermore, Senator, you will acknowledge the sacrifice given by the souls that the bugle has laid to rest, not because it is custom, but because it's the right thing to do. A murmur of acknowledgement ran through the senator's entourage.
That man,
the senator pointed at Captain Darish as he spat into the microphone,
is a danger to the fleet. Imagine the damage he would cause when his derangements turn his weapons against his own.
The lieutenant turned on his heels to face his captain, unholstered his Mark 18 Annihilator mag pistol, presented a clip of stabilized neutron slugs, and loaded the weapon. The room was dead silent as the winding of the rapid charge capacitor peaked and died out. How the lieutenant had acquired a sidearm that was that Deathworld infantry exclusive was irrelevant. How he had managed to get that weapon into the room was beside the point. Everyone in that room knew instinctively that the weapon the lieutenant deftly clicked the safety off and presented grip first to Captain Darish was capable of evaporating a medium-sized civilian vehicle in a single shot. Darish rose to his feet, looked at the presented weapon. "What is this, Lieutenant?" His tone suggested that the question was an indirect scolding mixed with immediate danger. "Naval regulations state that every officer in the fleet must, at all times, carry a loaded sidearm for purposes of protection and self-preservation, sir." The lieutenant quoted the book to the letter. Hansen, Captain Darish rested his hand on the shoulder of his exo. I am the last person in the galaxy you would want to arm. His eyes shot to the fleet admiral. Miranda, I thought we had had this discussion when I was offered the position on the tricard. The ship is disarmed, and as will I be at all times. I believe those were my terms. The fleet admiral nodded. They were, Captain. Darish's gaze shifted to the center. I'm fully aware of my situation, Senator, and I deal with it accordingly. I'm as medicated as I can be without becoming a liability, and my crew performs admirably. My ship is an exploration vessel, but fleet uses her as a training ground for the best and brightest that graduate the academy. We need leaders and officers who can think on their feet, roll with the flow, and deal with the challenges as they arise. He looked back at the lieutenant. Put that thing away, Hansen. The weapon was disarmed and emptied in safe manner before the lieutenant reholstered it. Good, Darish nodded. You will present yourself at my office tomorrow at a shift start for a disciplinary hearing. Mr. Lightfixture and Mrs. Roomba will have words for you. Lieutenant Hansen nodded. Now, if you excuse me, Darish continued unfazed, I have a widow to convey some bad news to. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.